couple of minutes here. Is similar to the presentation that you all listened to before, and that is concerning the Weems Memorial Hospital. What I'm gonna talk about, at least in an overview type of manner, give you some background on Baker Tilly, who we are, and why I am speaking to you this afternoon. Go through some of the information we reviewed, and then talk through what we believe would be kind of the rational next steps in looking at Weems Hospital and kind of how to move forward with that. Certainly, my last slide is if there's questions, but I like this to be a conversation. So if you have questions, by all means, please feel free to speak up, and we can just kind of talk through this. So without further ado, the team that I have earmarked to work on this project that we're going to discuss is obviously myself. I've worked in healthcare for 19 years now. Most of that time has been with rural and critical access hospitals. Done everything from certainly audit review compilations, but revenue cycle improvement, reimbursement improvement, operations analysis, really the whole gamut when it comes to the consulting side of things. Alongside me that will be working on the project is Keith Hutchison. Keith has a long history of working with hospitals. Right now he oversees somewhere around 500 Medicare cost reports annually. Extremely capable, extremely intelligent individual when it comes to reimbursement. I think you all heard in the last presentation some of the nuances with critical access hospitals and how reimbursement has such a significant impact on the operations of the facility. So Keith will be working along with me, and then lastly, David Gregory. David is a consultant that oversees contracting, and he also works in similar areas that I do with facility improvement plans and IT and those types of things. Myself, Keith, and David are all 100% healthcare. This is all we do. This is all we've done for our entire career, to be quite frank. So in any case, that's the initial team that is going to head this up. Now, a little bit about Baker Tilly, just to kind of level set with everyone. We are the 10th largest accounting firm in the United States. By the end of the year, we should have around 7,000 members, 600 partners, and again, by the end of the year, our revenue should be around $2 billion annually. We work in all 50 states, and certainly it's a very large firm. Beyond that, when we're looking at Baker Tilly, certainly healthcare is not all we do. But healthcare does make up 15 to 20% of our firm's revenue annually. So healthcare is a big portion of our firm. And when we say healthcare, obviously we work with hospitals, nursing homes, FQHCs, rural health clinics, that type, being the provider. That's really the group of providers. We also work on the life sciences side, which is your R&D, your medical device companies, IT companies, that type of thing, pharmacy. And then lastly, health plans. We do work with the payers. We work with places like Aetna, United Health, payers all across the country. And this is really relevant, and we'll get to why the insight into the health plan side is relevant as we kind of talk through this slide deck. So, beyond the normal accounting services that you would expect from a accounting firm, we do consulting in just about every facet of healthcare. Anywhere from internal audit to value-based accountable care organization, financing, certainly construction contract management, cybersecurity, HIPAA. The reason I'm telling you this is, as we'll discuss, I think there are some things that the hospital has areas for improvement. One of the advantages of working with a big firm is, like I said, we have 7,000 people internally. I have experts at my fingertips, regardless of what comes up. I think we will likely have an expert in-house that has seen it, done it, and can guide you through the solution. So that's a little bit about Baker Tilly. Now, as we start talking through the project, sorry, you know, one of the things I like to point out with any potential client is our aim when we're working with clients is that we're going to have meaningful conversations with you all, and we're going to come up with a plan or a blueprint specific to Weems Hospital. We're not going to come in with predisposed kind of boilerplate products and say, okay, well, this worked at a hospital in Minnesota. These are the 17 steps you need to take, and this will solve all your issues. That's not how we do business. We don't think that really benefits anyone. So as we talk through the project, keep that in mind that what we're going to talk about is really aimed at specifically Weems Memorial and what we see right now and where we think there are opportunities and what we think the right course of action to take. So when Michael had reached out, we had a kind of initial brief discussion with him to understand what the commissioners were working with or dealing with. Did a fair amount of due diligence, and the reason these bullet points are up here, it'll come to light as we talk through it. But certainly anytime we're looking at a project, we like to do as much due diligence as we can to really make sure the project's aimed in the right direction. So to do that, we did look at the 2021 audited financials. Those were the most recently available financials on the Florida Auditor General website. Also pulled your 2022 Medicare cost report that's publicly available. And actually the 2023 just came out a handful of days ago. So we also looked at that. Looked at the internal financial statements of the hospital. Also looked at the budget, and then certainly had some very good conversations with Ricky and Michael, just to kind of guide the project and give me some insight into really what direction the county wants to go and kind of guide the objectives of the project, so to speak. So with all of that in mind, as we look through those documents, some of the items, some of the really more pertinent items that came up, was the first one when we looked at the audited financials. So in the back of the financials, the auditors kind of go through a list of management points, meaning items that the hospital needs to address. A lot of those items dealt with the accounting, meaning cash wasn't being reconciled, accounts receivable had some issues in it. Payroll, there were issues with how payroll was being recorded. So, and we'll kind of get to why that matters here in a couple of slides, but as a backdrop, that's one of the things we first noticed was, at least in 2021, there were some fairly significant questions around the accounting that the hospital has. When we looked at both internal financials as well as the audited financials, the days in accounts receivable were a lot higher than I would have expected. I think the February financials were around 65 days. And that's for those of you not really familiar with the healthcare world, days in accounts receivable is one of the more important metrics of a hospital. That's how quickly you turn services into cash. Every hospital has its own kind of normal cycle, but I would tell you anything over 50 is generally an indicator that there's some dysfunction in the revenue cycle. And that'll come into play here in a handful of slides. Next thing we notice, obviously, there's a rapidly declining cash balance. Some of that's driven by the hospital's significant monthly losses. Certainly some of that's driven by the fact that accounts receivable are not being collected timely. And then further, we looked at the income statement of the hospital, and you know, in healthcare, certainly I don't think it's lost on anybody on this meeting that staffing is one of your highest costs, or is your highest cost. That's every health facility. Typically for a smaller rural hospital, you would want to see staffing somewhere between 45 and 50% of your monthly or annual revenues. Meaning if you had revenues of $1 million, you would expect to see staffing somewhere between 450,000 or 500,000. For February, the internals that we looked at showed staffing at actually over 100% of revenues. So that's, in our mind, that's an indicator that, one, either the accounting is driving that fluctuation, meaning something's not getting reported right, or in fact, the hospital has a pretty big opportunity for improvement when it comes to either the expense side or the revenue side. And then lastly, and I don't think it's lost on anybody on this call, there were significant budget to actual variances, meaning whatever was budgeted, the facility is certainly not performing as it was expected, whether that's an issue with the budget or that's an issue with the management. That is a question that we don't know the answer to, but in any case, this is kind of the backdrop of what we're going to talk through. So when we take everything into account, what we believe the best path to move forward is really laid on this slide. And the first thing to do is to get a handle on the hospital, what's going on in the hospital. Cash is declining very quickly. How long of a runway do we have to work with the hospital? Meaning, you know, certainly it's 3 months later than the internal financial statements. If cash has continued to decline at the pace that it has, you know, the hospital is going to be in a very tough situation by the end of May. But in any case, look at the financial viability, the short-term financial viability of the hospital, understand how much of a runway we have. From there, certainly institute a rapid performance improvement plan, and come up with a really short-term management action plan to stabilize the hospital as it currently operates. And then work with you all, the board of the hospital, the management of the hospital, and work on initiatives to really fix what the hospital has going on. So, you know, certainly we have some questions around the revenue cycle. We believe there's areas for opportunity there, or opportunities for improvement rather. And then work between you all, the management of the hospital, the board of the hospital, as a project manager to kind of move this thing forward. So to kind of put it plainly, what we think the right objectives are is see if we can fix the hospital as it stands today, meaning make it financially viable. If we can't, at least stabilize it, and then come up with, work through the next steps of okay, what's the long-term solution for the hospital? So this is kind of diving into the weeds of what the project would look like. Certainly the first thing is to get us up to speed and shorten our learning curve as to what's going on with the hospital. We propose reviewing these documents. That's your audited financial statements, any board minutes. If there are currently action plans internally, review those, understand where they are with them. If they're, if those plans have kind of gone off the rails or gotten shuttered, understand that. And then beyond that, understand, from a cash outflow standpoint, understand what the hospital has already really signed up for. So if there were large capital expenditures that have been executed in the last 2 or 3 months, and we expect a big cash outflow, obviously that would shorten the timeline that the hospital has to make changes. And then lastly, one of the last things in healthcare you want is an issue with either the Department of Health or the Joint Commission. So review those surveys, see if there are corrective action plans in place, or if really make sure that operationally the hospital is going to be stable for the next 6 to 8 months until things can be kind of the strategy of the hospital can be executed. So once we kind of get through the learning curve part of it, the next step we believe that makes sense is to do a financial analysis on the hospital. Certainly from our perspective, there's really 3 service lines here. There's the hospital, you have the 2 rural health clinics, and then the ambulance service. We believe that when you look at the hospital in a whole, meaning all 3 of these combined, you could have one service line that is bringing the whole hospital down. And that really needs to be vetted out and understood. And that certainly, as we look forward to where the hospital is going to be in 5 years, you need to understand if you've got a service line that is impacting the financials of the hospital. And that really sheds light on what the right decision is. Beyond that, I think we've touched on the short-term cash flow. And then last point here, and this, I think this was briefly touched on in the last meeting, looking at the hospital's current Medicare cost reports. So when we talk about, and I'm not going to try and give a seminar on Medicare reimbursement, but needless to say, the hospital's reimbursement is impacted by the Medicare cost report and what data is entered into that cost report. Something that we typically do when we start working with critical access hospitals is do a download of their Medicare cost report. A lot of times we find issues, we find structural issues, mathematical issues, whatever it may be that is losing the hospital money that it otherwise would have been entitled to. So that's kind of the financial piece of the project. The next thing that we're proposing to do is dig into the hospital's revenue cycle. So when we looked at the internal financial statements, as well as your audited financial statements, quite frankly, we talked about the days in accounts receivable, and that's kind of an indicator of underlying issues in the revenue cycle. But certainly we want to look at realization rates, denial rates, and these are all things that are going to drive whether the hospital is profitable or not, or even sustainable. And as we talk through the revenue cycle, this is something that I would recommend, even if you guys told me right now, hey, we already made the decision to go REH, you still need to address your revenue cycle. You could build a $100 million Taj Mahal of an REH, and if your revenue cycle isn't strong, the hospital's still not going to be sustainable. Meaning if you're not collecting for the services you've done, it doesn't matter what designation you have or how nice your facility is, it's not going to be sustainable. So beyond that, I think, one of the things that a lot of rural hospitals where there are areas for opportunity or areas for improvement are with your payer contracts. So outside of Medicare and Medicaid, any of your commercial payers, that's a negotiated rate. What we like to do is take the hospital's currently negotiated rate, compare it to your peers, compare it to what the market should bear. And quite frankly, sometimes or most of the time, there are areas for improved revenue reimbursement from your commercial payers. Beyond that, when it comes down to the processes of scheduling and registration, looking at those processes is, when you're talking about revenue cycle issues, the scheduling and the registration is really where a lot of your issues are going to start. So if your scheduling is not doing your either making sure that pre-authorizations are in place or doing the insurance verification or even getting the insurance information, that's going to lead to downstream issues within that revenue cycle. And I apologize up front. I know I'm getting into the weeds on healthcare, but I do think it's important to understand some of these items as we kind of talk through it. So beyond the initial scheduling and pre-registration, the next thing where we typically see revenue being lost is with follow-up. So the patient comes in, have their procedures done. If your back-end processes aren't stable and no one's following up on denials, if no one's following up on the insurance companies to say, hey, we saw Betty Sue 3 weeks ago, you haven't paid this claim, what's going on? That is certainly an area that we see a lot of hospitals bleeding money. Another area is self-pay practices. I am certainly not advocating for running people out of their house or anything like that, but certainly asking for payment up front, meaning whether it be your copay, your deductible, that is an area that typically is going to move the needle on the hospital's profitability. And a lot of smaller rural hospitals aren't very good at it. That's not a critique, that's just an observation. And then lastly, your write-off practices. So if there's no oversight, when claims are being written off at the hospital level, if nobody's watching, a lot of times we see revenue being lost simply through the accounts being written off rather than followed up on. So that's kind of the revenue cycle in a nutshell. Beyond that, I think one of the areas that piqued our interest as we were reviewing the internals and the external financial statements is the management of the hospital. So I told you a handful of slides ago when I was looking at the February internal financial statements that salaries were actually higher than revenues, which is, you don't see that very often. And I would tell you, when I compared February even to January, and Ricky and Mike, when I were talking about this, and I was showing them the financial statements, it was interesting. The trend from January to February, revenues actually dropped from January to February, and payroll expenses went up. Again, that's either an accounting issue or an oversight issue. And I think one of the things we'd like to look at is just how the organization's set up, how it's being managed, and is there an issue? Certainly, every hospital, you have minimum staffing requirements, But beyond that, for revenue to drop and expenses to go up is indicative of either maybe you don't have enough people, either nobody's watching expenses or you've got too many people watching expenses. So I think that's one of the areas that I think we'd like to take a look at. And then beyond that, the last bullet point here is the overall business structure. And, as I sat through the Stroudwater conversation, it sounded like everybody kind of got a high level overview of how Medicare reimbursement works. I would tell you the organizational structure has a very large impact on how the hospital's reimbursed, meaning currently the ambulance is being reported on the hospital's cost report. That pulls down overhead that would otherwise be reimbursed by Medicare. There could be a very good reason for that. But in any case, I do think that's something that should be considered, again, regardless of where the hospital ends up as an REH or CAH or joint venture, whatever it may be. Right-sizing the business structure and structuring the hospital correctly, considering the reimbursement, I think is something that is good. It is a good practice to do. So, where we see this project kind of ending, one of the items that we believe is a good thing for the commissioners to take a look at is certainly a market analysis. Obviously the hospitals market's not a huge market. I think there's, if I heard right, it's 12,000 folks in the county. But certainly I think it's fair to say you have volumes that are going elsewhere, probably either to Tallahassee or to Port St. Joe. Understand really, is there a hole in what services the hospital is delivering? Sometimes that's going to come out through network leakage, meaning if you have a whole bunch of procedures that are going to Port St. Joe that the hospital could be performing in-house, I think that's something that is worth looking at. The next thing is a community health needs assessment. So as I'm sure a lot of you know, the hospital does a community health needs assessment every 3 years. Looking at that, if there are needs in the community that the hospital is not meeting, understand what the opportunity is there. And all of that's going to kind of add up to if the hospital's missing service lines or if there is lost opportunity on the table right now. And then certainly when we take into account everything that we just went through, so looking at your revenue cycle, looking at the market, looking at how the expenses are being managed, and we add all of those up, I think at that point, once you understand, or once we all understand, how good the hospital can be if it's operating at 100%, at that point, I think then it makes sense to sit down and look at the viability of either critical access or, and these are just ideas. I mean, we could go a million ways in what the best structure, what the best designation is for the hospital. But without, in my opinion, without understanding kind of the underlying issues or challenges that have gotten you here, I think it's going to be tough to assess the viability of, even if you do convert to an REH, like we said, if you're not collecting your accounts receivable, REH isn't going to help you. You're going to have the same issues. So I know I just jabbered on for 35 minutes. Are there any questions, or I'd certainly like to have some discussion around this.
Commissioners, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I do.
All right, go ahead.
Yes, sir, I got a question for you. on what you were just saying right there, even if we, if we converted to an REH, whatever, if we've got more going out than we got coming in, it doesn't matter how big the pot is. I mean, it's not going to be sustainable in the long run. And I'm glad you said that, because I think you're kind of echoing some of the stuff that's been discussed on this board over the last year and a half. With that, sticking with that, whenever you did when you went back and looked at the 21, I believe it was, numbers, and realized that our revenue to expenditure was off balance, or staff. You said that, now, whenever you looked at that, does that incorporate the management fee as staff as well? Because we have pass-through cost in that, with the CFO and the CEO, and that,
Sure.
I'm just curious, was that also taken in consideration when you was looking at staff, as far as that amount of money going out?
So when I was looking at the staffing ratios that were drastically out of whack, I was talking about February of 2024. I don't know in the internal financials how they have those management fees grouped. That's certainly one consideration, but I would tell you, even if, in a normal hospital, your CFO and CEO costs are going to be included in those staffing ratios. So I guess what I'm telling you is, best case, they're out of whack. Worst case, they're really, really out of whack, to be quite blunt. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, somewhat. I just didn't know if it was in the stuff you was looking at, if it was itemized or some way of you can tell whether or not that CFO and CEO salaries pass forward, because that's pretty substantial. You're talking.
Yeah,
probably,
I would imagine. When I
collectively.
look at the internals, they've got it broken down by salaries, employee benefits, and professional fees, so on and so forth. There's a line called contract services. And it might be flowing through that contract services line. It might be in the salaries line. I don't know. There really weren't notes to the internal financials that would indicate one way or the other.
Okay, my other question was the 2022 Medicare cost report. What did that show you? I mean, were we bringing in a substantial amount of money with that? Because that goes back to the critical access. Is it worth keeping? That I'm just kind of rolling. I know you're not hired or yet or anything like that, but I got to ask some questions.
It's fine. The cost report, and I feel like I'm being a negative Nelly here. So don't take it wrong. The cost report left a lot to be desired, to be quite frank with you. Some of the areas that I thought would customarily be filled out were left blank. And if I recall, I think Medicare was worth, it might be $2.5 million a year to the hospital. So it wasn't a substantial portion. It wasn't, 50% of your revenues. But, $2.5 million is still $2.5 million. It's nothing to poo-poo. I do think that number could be higher. Even as far as, so you all may have kind of picked up on this. I'm kind of a data nerd. And I like going through cost reports, as hard as that is to believe. But I also looked at the rural health clinics on the Medicaid side, and the reimbursement was quite low, to be honest. And some of that's certainly the state of Florida and their reimbursement practices, but I do think there could be opportunity, as a rural health clinic in Florida. The rural health clinic has the opportunity to reset its rates, or realistically increase its rates that it's paid by Medicaid through filing. It's called change of scope. So if the clinic starts offering a new service, it goes back to the state and says, hey, we're doing a new service. We need more money. Here's what our rate should be. And it's the same for FQHCs and rural health clinics, but in most scenarios, that's something we see done at least every handful of years. And kind of based on my review, I'm not sure if the hospital's gone through that process, and maybe it wasn't eligible. Maybe there have been no changes in scope. That's a possibility, but that was one of the things that jumped out at me.
Well, we haven't increased any services, so that,
Okay. Sure.
well, Mr. Chairman, I think I don't know if anybody else want to jump in.
Anyone else have any questions?
Mr. Chairman, you stated, Mr. Rayleigh, that in terms of the negotiating the payers, and your payers meaning insurance companies, correct? So
Yes.
obviously, and I've talked about insurance companies before on this board. Whose responsibility is to negotiate with these payers to say, hey, you know, we had an inpatient stay that cost $20,000, but yet you're giving us $5,000. How can you sustain any business that way? So who's responsible for going to these insurance companies and negotiating? If you can answer that question for me.
Well, the short answer is management. You know, with smaller hospitals, typically they bring in consultants. You know, in big systems, they have a person that's all they do. They sit and look at contracts. They see what the next facility down the road's getting paid. They go back to the payers and say, hey, we want an extra 7%. You know, that's their full-time job. In smaller rural hospitals, a lot of times it follows to consultants like us, where we come in and we look at, you know, over the last handful of years, the regulations have changed, and there is a plethora of publicly available data by payer. So pick whatever insurance company is most prevalent in your area. You can go out on the website, and if you have the right tools, you can download what they're paying every single facility that's in their network by procedure. So, you know, if you walk into Fort St. Joe, you could look up and see what Aetna's paying Fort St. Joe for a hip replacement. You know, pick the procedure. And you could compare that to what your hospital's receiving. But I think, you know, beyond that, I think in the payer contracts, there's a lot of opportunities typically just looking at the language of the contracts, meaning what services can be denied and for what reason, how quickly the payers are required to, if you get a new physician, to accept that new physician, what changes can be made to the contracts, who can get into the contract, who can back out of the contract. There's opportunities with payer contracts that go beyond just how much are you getting paid for a level 1 ER visit, so to speak. And that's generally that's where we find a lot of opportunities is not only in how much are you being paid, but, you know, it doesn't do the hospital any good if you negotiate a rate of $1,000 for an ER visit if the insurance company is denying 90% of your claims. So you really have to deal with both sides of the contract.
Mr. Chairman, I got another question. You mentioned in your presentation days revenue and accounts receivable. So
Yes.
that means essentially, if I'm understanding this correctly, that anytime a bill goes out, it's sitting on a desk, and days are going by, it's not being received back as reimbursement. Is there a set time that says, all right, well, we haven't gotten it in 30, 60, 90 days, the insurance company's gonna throw that claim out, so that's still money that we're not gonna see as reimbursement because we let it stay in this cycle for so long?
Yep. You are spot on. That's called timely filing denials. Every insurance company has their own rules. Medicare, I believe, is 180 days. But again, it comes back to the contract with your commercial payers, because you can't argue with CMS being Medicare or the state Medicaid. That they have their rules and we all have to abide by them. But when it comes to commercial payers, that's actually a really good example of some of the terms of the contract is how long do you have to file those claims, and under what parameters can the payer either slow pay or no pay. But yeah, that you're spot on with your observation, and that's why I tell you, days in accounts receivable is. Listen, I work with hospitals all over the country, anywhere from, probably 4 million to over 2 billion in revenues. Days in accounts receivable is the first thing I look at every single time, because it's such an indicator of where the hospital is with its kind of the cleanliness of the revenue cycle, so to speak. That's hands down the first indicator. Once in a while, you'll run into a good reason that days are high, but generally, a higher days in AR is indicative of some underlying issues.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Jim, I will say this. This is definitely not the first time we've talked about this, but I appreciate the approach you've taken to this presentation today.
Good.
I think it reflects a lot of the discussion our board has been having about healthcare in Franklin County and making sure it's sustainable. That's not meant to be a negative, that's meant to be a positive, because like I've said before, what we do with Weems and this facility is a good first step in healthcare in Franklin County. We've been circling around this tree long enough. We need to find out a way to get what we're gonna do done and move forward, because there's other things that need to be done. Just a hospital facility or freestanding ER or whatever we wind up with is not the end of this discussion. It's a good start. We have a lot of things to do. Residents are looking to this board, this commission, to make sure that we're taking their health and their safety in a responsible manner. So we've got to find a way to quit circling this tree and move forward. But I appreciate the approach you've taken in your presentation, because I do believe it reflects a lot of the discussion this board has had about healthcare, especially in recent months.
Yeah, no, glad to do it. I've, I enjoyed getting to talk to you and Michael and go through all the data and I had planned to say something, but kind of decided not to. But now I'm going to anyway. So, I logged on to the meeting early and listened to you all do the prayer and the pledge before the meeting, and have certainly listened to all the presentations throughout. And I'm very impressed by the commissioners. For Franklin County to have a group of folks that are grounded and still come together, and your questions are excellent. I want to commend you all on that. It's from my perspective, it's nice to see. So,
Thank you, sir. Let's have any questions before we're done.
I think he answered what I asked, was asking before, so I'm glad of that.
Yeah, you did. Right, well, sir, thank you for your presentation. We really appreciate it, and thank you for your time. We realize it took a minute to get to you today, but thank you for being patient with us. We appreciate it.
sure. All right, thanks everybody.
Yes, sir. All right, Mr. Ted Mostedler, is he here? Is he gone?
He just stepped out the back. He might have went to the restroom.
Okay, Mr. Steve, we'll skip to you. You're the next next contestant on The Price is Right. Come on down.
I told you it was gonna be a long one.
Oh, my gosh. I'll tell you, that gentleman, he looked at your books. I was very impressed with him. Steve Kirschenbaum, Chairman of the Airport Operations and Economic Development Board. Going to go over this month's report. Big thing was, we went to MRO America. I was a guest of Jennifer Connolly and Shane Chadwick from Florida's Great Northwest. Jennifer's the CEO over there. And there were hundreds of companies soliciting business and looking to locate in Florida. And I actually sat down with Lockheed Martin. Tom was laughing when I picked the companies I sat with. I sat with Lockheed Martin, I sat with Boeing, I sat with Airbus, I sat with Pratt & Whitney. But there were hundreds of companies there that if we made this a regular affair, we would definitely bring back the gold to Franklin County. There's a couple that really bit hard, and they want to keep it proprietary yet, and hopefully we'll hear some good news soon. I have Jennifer on the back line if she's there via Zoom, just to give us a quick little report. Hey, Jen.
Go ahead, Jim.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. How are you today?
Doing well. How you doing?
Good. Yeah, so as your regional economic development marketing arm and organization, I just wanted to give a little update. As you all may know, so our organization, Florida's Great Northwest, covers 13 counties in Northwest Florida. So we go from Pensacola in Escambia County all the way to Wakulla County, and then up to the state line of Alabama, with Jackson County also bordering Georgia. And so our purpose is to find the commonalities of what's important in our target industry sectors in Northwest Florida and market that. So marketing the assets, and one of those assets is Triumph Gulf Coast as our coastal county economic development incentive fund for Northwest Florida. And so we have been majorly focused in aviation and aerospace and defense sector for many, many years. And so the MRO America show is one that we've done often. And just for the public's knowledge, MRO stands for maintenance, repair, and overhaul. So we're talking with the companies there that do aircraft maintenance, engine maintenance, and repair. So there's a broad range of companies that go there. In fact, this past year, they had over 17,000 attendees and close to 1,000 exhibitors. And so what we do, so Florida's Great Northwest partnered with Select Florida as our state organization and marketing arm, and that gives us more brand recognition and credibility there. And then we, as Florida's Great Northwest, set up appointments to talk specifically about the assets in the region. And so Steve was able to, and Tom were able to participate in several of our meetings just within Northwest Florida and Florida's Great Northwest. Our specific appointment itinerary, we had about 12 scheduled meetings and had incredible conversations. In fact, we were fortunate to already host a site visit that was looking at one of our westward counties just 2 weeks after the show. And the important thing here is that building those relationships are key, because when some of these aviation executives bounce from maybe company to company, when they are ready to make that location expansion decision, our goal is for Northwest Florida and our aviation assets to be top of mind, so that then they know who to call, and then we know who to connect them to locally. And I just have to say, we're out there all the time talking about Franklin County, but specifically this trip, with what you all have done to continue to put your focus on the Apalachicola Regional Airport is starting to pay dividends. We had several companies, 2 specific companies that were very interested in what you all could bring to bear and to the table. and again, partnered with Triumph Gulf Coast. So we are continuing to, they're not ready to make decisions yet, but we're definitely trying to have those conversations to make sure that we're ready regionally and locally for when that company comes to us and says, okay, we're ready to go. So just building up that brand recognition and us being ready when they come to the table is really key. So I do applaud you all for your focus there, and think you've got a gem, and we're ready to help make that successful in Franklin County.
Jennifer, it was an absolute pleasure sitting in on the meetings with you and working with you and helping people smile a little bit through the dialogue. Thanks so much. We had some great media kits that we passed out there, and I know a little bit of Spanish, so when I was talking to some of the clients that spoke Spanish, I could kind of have a common denominator there, and we had a lot of fun. The first thing on our action items was the zone change for Desert Ranches, so letting you know we really researched the heck out of that, and we're very comfortable with what happened, and cellular coverage on the west end of the county is real important. The second thing was we've been working closely with Tyndall Air Force Base about the training device static display at the airport. The county attorney agreed on the language of the final license agreement with his edits, and we'd love for the chairman to be authorized to sign that agreement when it comes back to the board. And do you have Michael, do you have a picture of that training device they're going to put there at the airport?
Attorney Schuler, you don't have that agreement ready for us today, though, do you?
I think it was sent across by Michael. Michael, do you have a copy of that agreement?
Can we do one thing at a time?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Let's answer the chairman's question first.
You good, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I do not have a final version ready to present here today for
Okay.
either this agreement or the T-hanger. I had spoken with Mr. Kirschenbaum, and he had told me he wanted to be the one to present, so I approved it, and I thought that, I guess my mistake, I just presumed he was going to copy it and
Okay.
attach it to his record, but, you know, we'll figure it out.
Okay.
I have reviewed it, the changes I've requested for the agreement he's describing to the board today, are acceptable, and I do recommend approval of that agreement, with the piece of equipment Mike's about to show you.
Okay.
And I sent that across to Michael yesterday, so hopefully he has that.
Yeah, Commissioner, so you guys do have a copy of the
Attached to the report.
agreement. It was included as part of the agenda packet. I'm not quite sure if you guys are ready for it or not. That's,
All right, it's either way. If the attorney's reviewed it and he's good with it, I don't see no problem with it.
that's what you're looking for, Steve?
Oh, what's that? Yeah, that's it. That's what Tyndall intends to put at the site. It's a static display, and they're gonna have their Enviro guy come by the site next week just to sign off on the property. And it's a good thing, because it's gonna we happen to be dead center in the Gulf test range, and Tyndall said it would be really helpful to their pilots' training in the Gulf to have something like this to work with. And basically, it'll be somebody on site with an electronic device sending out signals over the Gulf, and the pilots will respond. And I think it will be a wonderful thing for the county, and hopefully it could help us in the future, maybe with funding and infrastructure at the airport.
So they're not aimed at Commissioner Amos's house, is what you're saying?
No,
I'm
no.
gonna charge admission to come out and look at it.
And I think it might be a little bit of a tourist attraction for kids to want to come out to the airport to look over the fence and see something like that.
Well, knowing that the attorney's looked over the contract or the agreement and is good with the language, is the board wanting to take action today, or what are you wanting to do?
Yeah, I'd love for you to take action today, and this way we can move forward with Tyndall. It'll probably be about 30 days to get the executed agreement back.
Pleasure of the board.
So moved. Question though, do we have to wait for that Attorney Schuler to bring it back to us, or
Well, he
is
said-
it just tentative on his?
He said he's already reviewed
Okay.
it, and it's actually in the packet.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, so moved.
Correct. Well, I haven't seen the packets, that I don't know.
I know, there was, Steve sent me a version, he said he got from you with some edits on the side. That's what the board has on their agenda packet.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
he said that's what you got from Schuler?
Yes.
correct, sir? Okay.
Right.
Just want to make sure.
Sort of to go through the steps, I received the original proposed agreement from Tyndall, made some edits. They sent back a reply. They agreed with like 99% of the changes I'd requested, not that I made a bunch of changes to it. The one thing they did not look to change was on the environmental audit that Steve was just referring to. So that environmental audit will be performed by Tyndall. Essentially, I wasn't real happy about it to begin with, and I wanted it out, but it doesn't hurt to have it in there either at the end of the day, because it just says that if we've contaminated the land, we have to clean it up, and if they contaminate the land, they have to clean it up. But I understand why the federal government wants to do all these, they have all these boxes that they have to check. They want to check the box that says we did an environmental assessment before the agreement, before the product gets on the land, and then the second box to check is they'll do an environmental audit when the agreement's terminated. I mean, it's a static display. It's not operational. It doesn't have oil. It doesn't have gas. I mean, the odds of any kind of contamination are, I think, astronomically low. So therefore, I'm okay with the document as revised. So if you approve it, as it's in your package, authorize the chairman to sign it. We can get it back from them, and then when we get the document back from Tyndall, just have the chairman sign it and move on.
I'll second Commissioner Amoson's motion.
Does your motion still stand, sir?
Yes.
Okay. So we do have a motion to approve by Commissioner Amoson, second by Commissioner Ward. Any more discussion before we vote? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That's unanimous.
Thank you, Commissioners. That was a lot of work to make that happen. Also, we have a revised license agreement, and in lieu of the FAA coming down to the site, I'd love to have these new license agreements approved to get out to all the users at the airport that show Franklin County as the licensee, leasing the hangars to the users at the site. Attorney Schuler reviewed the new contract, and he's okay with his changes that he put in there. And he totally indemnifies the county and the airport board, which I think is a great thing. So I'd like to just get a motion or approval to accept the new hangar agreements for distribution to the tenants.
And once again, the copy you have is what Mr. Kirchenbaum said he got from Attorney Schuler with his edits and reviews.
So moved.
All right, so we have a motion to approve by Commissioner Ward,
Second.
second by Commissioner Sanders. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That's unanimous.
Okay, and I'm trying to keep it as short as possible because you guys had a heck of a meeting today. I apologize y'all had to spend so long, but.
We're not done yet.
Yeah. The runway airport equipment, we did a workshop at the airport site, and Ted's 100% right that the equipment needs a lot of service. It's been neglected in the air. But the big issue that I addressed on a separate report that I sent to everybody was the fact that even if we repair some of the equipment, it's been out in the elements for a decade. Other stuff is going to go wrong. And on the equipment that's used maybe once a year, once every couple of years, a stump grinder, call a tree guy down to the site. A tree cutter, call a tree guy down to the site. The high lift that he has at the site for changing bulbs, putting antennas on, we use it periodically, and I think it would be a wiser move for that thing to stay. It's at the road, at the Parks Department right now, Parks and Rec, and they use it more than we do. How about we transfer it over to them, compensate the airport fund, we have some extra money to buy equipment, and that high lift will be properly serviced and available to the airport in the future. So you guys have a list that I gave you of an opinion of some of the equipment. It was a couple pages, but the Timco sweeper truck that he has at site, until a suitable replacement is gotten for that, I would not place that in the auction, and I wouldn't place the high lift in the auction. The sweeper, upon review of what it does, it has terrible brushes on it right now. It goes 5 miles an hour. The runway is 5,400 feet long. It sweeps about a 6-foot wide area. To do the whole runway, it takes like 20 passes to go back and forth, probably about 4 hours to do the runway. But if it had the proper brushes on it, and if the air conditioning was working properly, it's an incredible piece of equipment. So I would keep that until we come up with a better idea to replace it. But there was a couple other things, a stump grinder, a tree cutter, an old pull-behind sweeper, some beat-up lawn mowers, some fence posts, everything on that list that I sent across, I think would be a good idea, not just to auction off. It won't yield a bunch of money, but it'll clean up the area where we're proposing to put the future building for airport equipment at. And also, we got lucky, Attorney Schuler finally got through to the person with the helicopter hangar, and they're out of it now, so Ted could start putting equipment inside. And I would never buy any equipment that doesn't fit inside that building until after the new building is erected, because you'll be up against the same exact thing. And only last thing is, right now, we have about 7.5 million out in potential appropriations that we're gonna have to work, and Mary Swoop is more than happy to set up meetings with me to try to make this money happen on this year's budget. And the last thing was, and I'm gonna try to work this, we got approval from the FAA and the Air Force for a flyby for the July 3rd celebration. I still have to secure the aircraft, and what the killer is, I got a call from Tyndall the day before yesterday that said we could do the July 3rd flyby, but only on July 4th. So now what I'm gonna try and do, this sounds crazy, because Tyndall has a ship available, 2 ships available to do this. I'm gonna try to file duplicate paperwork with the FAA and the Pentagon and maybe use that flyby for the island, but I'm working hard with Eglin to get Eglin to fill that void, and Eglin has 50 ships over there, so I really think with our relationship, me and Ricky met with the vice commander of Eglin, I think we'll have a good luck. So I'm on that now, and hopefully we'll have a July 3rd flyby on July 3rd. And thank you for your time, and I appreciate you guys sending me off to Chicago, and I think that's something we should do every year. And if Jennifer's still out there, thank you, Jen.
Thank you, Steve.
All right, thank you, guys.
Mr. Chairman, before you bring Ted and before Steve walks away, I kind of want to publicly thank Tom Mesher. Tom took some time out, again, he's a volunteer. He took his time out to train Scott on, we ordered a new radio, headset, the equipment to train Scott on that, train him about proper procedures on the airport, when to get on the runway, when not, what to look out for. You know, and I could go on and on, but I really want to publicly thank Tom for doing what he did. I mean,
And he's an
again,
incredible asset, and I apologize, Tom, for not saying thank you.
yes,
Tom's amazing.
As a training pilot, he did a very good job and helped Scott a whole lot, so. Again, just want to thank him. We know we always try to thank our volunteers for what they do. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Michael,
Sir.
before we transition, is there anything in your report we need to talk about while they're here?
Number 13.
If I can find where I put my report. So that happens when you buy me lunch, huh?
New number 13 is just informational, but still is about
Yeah.
the report.
Okay.
Am I all good?
13. Oh, and Steve brought this up already. As stated in Mr. Kirschenbaum's report, he submitted an appropriation request to State Senator Rick Scott for new hangars at the airport. That's what it was for, correct?
Yep.
As, if we receive that appropriation, or we're notified that they want to proceed with that, that's when the staff will get involved with that process. For now, Steve went ahead and worked with Ms. Mary Swope on it, and they submitted that to the senator's office.
Yes, sir.
And did mention that. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Mr. Ted, we didn't try to skip you when we called your name. You weren't here, sir. You're up next. Thank you for being patient with us.
Michael?
Sir.
This Michael, okay. Give each commissioner one copy for Michael's records. Good afternoon, gentlemen and ladies, commissioners, staff. Ted Mosteller, your airport manager, Apalachicola Regional Airport. You have my report. I trust that everyone read the very lengthy, boring report on the equipment that I promised you last time I was before you. I know that it's long and I know it's boring, but there's a lot of information in there, probably too much. But recent events, I would say it's necessary that you know what's going on. From my experience, and who purchased the equipment originally, most of it, and have used it over the years, and contrary, except for the stump grinder, every piece of equipment out there is operational. The 5520 is in Panama City and possibly on its way home today from Beard Equipment. The 797 Z-turn is still over there and supposed to be ready at the end of the week. So we'll see what happens there. I'll bring attention to that license. That is your copy, as a little token, as a little souvenir of the hard work that we put in at the airport over the last several months to pass this inspection. If you read the second paragraph, there are discrepancies. And some of those are tree discrepancies, Commissioner Amison, that we need to get off of we need to go back into some private property there. Most of the other is are discrepancies that currently Collins Land Clearing is out there working as we speak. So that project is on its way, and it will take care of several of these discrepancies. Do you have any questions about the license I might point out?
I don't have any questions.
Okay. Hey, he got it. Thank you, Michael. If you look at the map there, the gray or the brown tannish areas adjoining the runways and the aprons are what has been cleared and mowed routinely with the finished mower. Now, you see on the far bottom right, the green and the purple or pink or whatever that is, and the brown below it. The brown is a swamp, so I don't think we're going to have to mow there. But what I'm saying is all this other area, as well as the opposite end of that runway, the reddish up there, purple or whatever it is, and then on the left bottom there, the red and the black or whatever. And of course, at the end of 06, which is on your middle right-hand side there, the kind of a pink, light green color. Currently, Collins is working down in the bottom right-hand corner to cut brush. I don't know if anyone has been out there or not, but they are, like I say, working as we speak. What I'm trying to point out is, you see what's in tan that's been done now and previously. Now, when they finish clearing, we're going to have to keep that mowed. And what I'm saying is, we're probably going to be almost doubling the amount of mowing to be done by the time all those projects are finished. We did the north end up there, 3-6, well, it would be the approach to 1-8 coming south, or the takeoff on 3-6. We did that last fall, I believe it was, Commissioner Amos?
What's that?
The clearing we did up there, that was
last year this time.
yeah, it was last year sometime. I don't remember exactly the month. But that, we've been mowing on that. The matter of the tree cutter came up. It's not a tree cutter per se. It's called a tree cutter, but all it is a heavy-duty bush hog. And it's for brush and saplings and things. It actually says you can back into a 10-inch tree. I wouldn't do it. And it'll cut a 10-inch tree down, but it's nothing but an implement that goes on the back of the tractor that it's a brown manufacturer's name, tree cutter. I don't want to put the 20-foot bat wing in anywhere but where you see the tan right now, because the terrain is so rough up in the north end with that brand new mower. Well, it was new last year. Aaron, do you remember the purchase price of that thing? The 20-foot mower that we purchased last year or year before now?
Oh, goodness, probably around 20,000 an attachment?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, that is a finished mower, and we need to keep it in take care of it, is what I'm trying to say. Now, we do have an older one that I've repaired, and it's working fine. I found blades on it that were running backward, and it doesn't cut very well with the blade running backward, and that's the reason the new one was purchased. That happened during my 10-year absence. Anyway, I don't know how many acres that entails, but I figured up somewhere roughly 200 acres additional. But some of that 200 acres, like the brown in the bottom right-hand corner, is swamp, so obviously we're not going to be mowing that. That's the swamp that the Corps of Engineers killed in the first dredging project a few years ago that they had to replant. But they are in there cutting out trees, big trees, because they are navigational or a aircraft hazard. If you look on the, I'll point you to the report. There are 3 sections. The first section doesn't really have anything to do with the equipment other than it's a proposed housing for the equipment. And I apologize for it being rather crude and sketchy, but it'll give you some idea of what I'm proposing now. What we come up with in the end, I don't know. Section 2 is sourcing of the equipment. Who paid for it? Where did we get it? Complete with FDOT numbers. You can research this yourself and check those numbers out, and you'll find that everything on there except number 10, 24, 31, 33, 34, 40, and 41 were purchased with FDOT funds. Contrary to the rumor going around that only the sweeper was purchased with FDOT funds. Any questions on that equipment list, what I've said so far? Too much to digest?
No, it's not too much to digest, Mr. Ted.
I'm sorry, say again?
It's not too much to digest. The issue is it's, so we're talking about that we're increasing the size that needs to be mowed
Yes, sir.
and what needs to be upkept.
Yes, sir.
And the bigger problem is most every piece of equipment, I don't care where it come from, that's on the list of what we use is 20 years old or older.
Yes, sir.
And if we're trying to do more maintenance, we're not going to do it with older materials.
Okay.
That's where we're at, but go ahead.
Well, I'm sorry. Let me explain maintenance a little bit from my experience. Maintenance is needed. It's an everyday, your lawnmower at home, how often do you replace the blades? How often do you change a flat tire? Or a fan belt or something like that. I mean, this is ongoing even with brand new equipment. To use an example, the new 997R that's listed on here, the first, it's still under warranty, and it has been in the shop about as much as it's been on site because it's the new regen diesel engine, and they're nothing but trouble. Everybody I talk to, mechanics on, salesmen on down. So, but anyway, it's running, it's working. At the very moment, it's the only one we have zero turn working. And the reason we use zero turn is around those lights. You can't go out there with a 20-foot bat wing and as clumsy it is mow around those lights. We don't want to mow the lights down, which has happened.
Right.
Let's see here. I'm sorry to be so long, but
And while Ted is looking, Commissioners, there was a email, I'm not sure if you guys got a copy of it yet, I saw it yesterday or the day before, where John reached out to Quentin from, what is it?
FDOT.
Yeah, FDOT. And Quentin said basically the only piece of equipment that they would be looking at if we auctioned or transferred or moved, whatever, would be the brush sweeper. That's it. He never mentioned the lift or any of the other equipment that FDOT's
That was my
looking
next
for.
question.
But
Mr. Chairman, I got a question on that. Is that because the other equipment's so old?
could be. I was gonna ask John that, but I was gonna wait till after today to see where we are. Commissioner, I'm with you. I mean, I hear what you guys are saying. Because of the age, they might have written it off themselves, you know?
That was my question, Mr. Chairman, was can we auction off this equipment since we technically didn't purchase it with county funds? You know, it's FDOT, but if that's the only one he's concerned about, then maybe there is a statute of limitations, if you will, on the year of when they gave us, or when they paid for it, I guess. I don't know.
To
I
make-
was, I'm sorry.
Just to make it kind of simple, as long as, whatever the FDOT we use to buy, whatever equipment we use to, or we purchase with FDOT money, has to be auctioned off at fair market value. But if the FDOT does not claim said equipment because of whatever reason, then we can auction it off for whatever we want to make the base bid for.
Yes.
So technically, what's happened is FDOT, which is Quentin, has said this is the only equipment that we have. And that's the only equipment they care about being at fair market value. Is that, I mean, that's what I'm reading into the
Yes, so-
emails and everything,
What I would
so.
like, if the board would allow me to contact, I'm gonna bypass John, if the board doesn't mind, contact Quentin directly and say, Quentin, here is the exact scenario, here's what we wanna do, I need to know from you in writing if you're good with this. And that's what I'd like to do, to clear up this constant back and forth of who owns what and who we bought, you know, blah, blah, blah type of deal.
Fine. I'm good with that. Are y'all good
And
with
I'm
that?
not, if you guys are good with that, I don't even need a motion, I'm just looking for direction from the staff to go, from the board to the staff to go ahead and do that.
Well, we do need that answered.
Yes.
We need that answered.
And then, based on all the information you've gotten from Tad, from, the AOED, everybody else, then you guys can make a decision exactly of what you want to actually auction, what you want to, cause I mean, to me, it's a win-win situation with the lift. If we move the lift to, Parks and Rec, which whatever manner we have, and don't take us the wrong way, but the maintenance department will quicker maintain it if Founder Howard says to do it versus if Ted says to do it. I'm just being straightforward, honest.
Well, it's also close to them.
That's right. So if it's under Parks and Rec, all Ted or Scott have to do is call Founder and say, hey, I need you guys to bring the lift out to me we need it for the next 2 weeks because we have these number of repairs. So basically, Mr. Kirschenbaum is right. You're getting money into the airport fund for fair value if that's required, but the airport still has access to this lift if they need it, whenever they need it. And again, it'll probably be maintained under Founder, under Howard a lot better, in my opinion there, but I really think so.
No, it will be, because it's next door to the
Yes.
road department, who already does most of the maintenance on
Yes.
the stuff during the off-season.
Yes.
And just for the record, I was kind of the one that approached that idea. I know there's been some conversation. This didn't come from anybody on the board or anybody. This actually come from when I first got in here, and we got that high lift repaired for $27,000, and they did I'm not even gonna use the word I was about to say, but not a very good job. But with that being said, Mr. Ted, at that time, you told me, or you were kind of alluding to maybe possibly the road department, or not the road department, but solid waste, Parks and Recs, to help pay for the thing because they use it more than we do. And that was your words.
Yes, sir.
So, I mean, with that being in, taking that in, I got to thinking, I said, well, if they're using it more than the airport, why don't we just shift it over? They can maintain it. We won't have this $27,000 job that, I'm not even calling that a repair job, but that made perfect sense. Now, when I mentioned that to other people, they were fine. Now, granted, I know, in conversation with you now, you don't want it to move outside the fence, but that's not what you were, I don't know what you want with it. I mean, you want to hang on to everything out there, and all we're trying to do is get some equipment that's actually updated, works, where we don't spend 90% of our time doing maintenance and 10% of our time doing groundwork, actually on the ground. I don't understand. I'm getting frustrated with it. I've been watching the emails. I watched the airport board meeting where in there you alluded in there that this come out of nowhere. And that's, I can quote you. We can go back and look at it about the equipment. Then you had some of the airport board members that was frustrated because they felt as though the county commission was going around them. And then everybody on that I sat there and listened to that 2-hour meeting, and everybody went to arguing, and I'm sitting there going, this is not the case. And you said, well, I don't know where this is coming from. It's coming out of lot. This is all a shock to me. No, sir, we had discussed this 3 months prior to that. Now, that kind of frustrated me a little bit. I'm going to be honest with you, because everything's been running very smoothly until we talked about replacing some equipment, and you have dug in, sir. I mean, you are fighting tooth and nail with this. You know, it's our job to make this decision. If it's a bad decision, we wear it at the end of the day.
Okay.
That's what we're here for. Well, if it's a good decision, we got it. If it's a bad decision, we still have to eat it. But this prolong and combativeness and whatnot needs to stop. We need to just move forward this. Let's try to replace some equipment. That's what we, as a board, think that we need to do. And let's continue business, because this airport, and I've said this before, you know, for years, and I grew up next to it. I remember as a kid watching Jimmy Elliott in his little kite plane, and you guys all out there growing, that was a hobby airport. We are not a hobby airport any longer. That is a one-way avenue into this community. It feeds our economy, and it needs to be looked at and managed in the future in that regard.
Yes, sir.
And that's just all I have to say about it. But we gotta we gotta dress it up. We gotta have the equipment to do it. We gotta have updated equipment that's reliable, you know. And that's just I'm gonna let it rest at that.
Yeah. Well, no, that's true. Mr. Ted, that's the same conversation you and I had. I know at the time you probably thought it was being different, but I told you in the conversation, I expressed the same concerns as Commissioner Amison. It's not about trying to just protect what we have. We are now sitting on the precipice of a time when this county can actually realize economic diversity, and that airport can be a main player in it. But to do that, we have to move past 1985. We have to move into our current time. So, you know, it was the same thing, and I told you then, just like I'm telling you now, it was nothing about anything other than what this board has over the last several months directed that we need to look at. We can talk about how the equipment's been out in the weather, all these different things. That's even more reason to get rid of it. That's not a reason to hang on to it. Because, yeah, it might be a simple fix to tomorrow, but over a 6-month time period, you can almost have paid for that equipment plus the downtime, and you still got bad equipment. So that's the only thing we're trying to communicate, Mr. Ted. It's not directed to you, other than the fact that when we started having this discussion, you've dug your heels in about it.
Okay.
I don't understand that, but at the end of the day, we need to move on with this equipment.
Well, sir, if you go back to the last meeting that we discussed this, I made the statement, what are we going to use after you auction it off until we get a new piece of equipment?
If we have to, we'll rent something, Mr. Ted.
I'm sorry?
If we have to, we'll rent something from the rental center.
Okay.
But we're not gonna leave you without something to do the job.
Okay.
But it this is the only way we as local government can transact our business.
Okay.
We need to show our citizens that we're doing our best to handle everything the correct way. If we have stuff that is either older or surplus or auctionable items, we need to hold that auction.
Okay.
Use those proceeds as leverage with other dollars against getting new equipment and try and have everything at a standard of practice. We
Yes.
do it with every department we have.
Okay.
Every department we have. So yeah, if there's a time in between that we need to rent something or have something on site, then yeah, we'll make that happen.
I don't
It's
deny
not about
that.
just taking away, Mr. Ted.
The Hialeah, it is currently in the helicopter hangar.
Okay.
I put it in last week. Going back to the report, if you look on page 27, there's a list of items waiting for the Hialeah, 21 items that I've listed. We did 2 of them last week, the antenna and replacing some of the screws and hopefully patch the roof on the FBO. Every hangar out there is now, the screws are rusting. It's the marine atmosphere of Apalachicola and on this coast. The screws on the roof of the FBO have been replaced, I know one time. Polaronis Construction did that, probably 15 years ago. If you Google it, I learned from Google, if you want to put any stock in that the average life of screws in a metal building roof where they're exposed is 15 to 20 years. And every building out there is almost in that category. The FBO building is some 35 years old. But like I say, the screws on the roof have been replaced, but they're rusting again. So just a tidbit of information there on the use of that high lift. In other words, and it goes back to time. And help. I've been forbidden not to operate the big equipment. I can't use volunteer to operate the big equipment, so I only have Scott. I'm supposed to be the supervisor and the airport manager who's supposedly being in charge of this equipment. At least I thought so. And my point is showing you the map and showing you what is coming up. I would like to put this bug in your ear to start thinking about possibly another employee, since you've lost me. And Tom been working but with a zero turn. He doesn't operate the big equipment, the big tractors or the high lift. Scott operated that.
Mr. Ted, I'm not trying to cut you short. This is not about you, but we have something that Michael Marone just told me that we need to advance to take care of something that's just come up. Is there any actionable items in your report that we need to take action on?
I think that pretty well covered it. I will say very quickly that the emitter from the Air Force, I have installed electric and it's ready to go.
Okay.
I mentioned that a couple of times ago, that it was in the making. I think pretty well got it. You got the new license, Tyndall. I have posted that license, by the way.
But is there anything you have that requires
I
action?
think, no, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ted. Mr. Rolfe?
I need you to take a break, Commissioner, for 5 minutes.